Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers is a weekly program designed to answer all your questions, including the ones you didn't even know you had, and to clarify the endless debates around the wonderful and fascinating world of sexuality. Join us for real talk about sex from two experts in the field. Richard and Larry Siegel have over 50 years of experience as sex therapists, educators, counselors, and researchers. The Siegel Brothers are recognized around the world as trainers of medical and mental health professionals.
Hello, thanks for joining us on Sex Talk. My name is Dr. Ricky Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist and supervisor.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And indeed, my awesome big brother, to whom I would like to toast.
Right back at you, my brother.
Thank you. This
Cheers.
is our ritual sake toast.
Yes.
And
And a toast to you all for joining us, and being with us tonight.
Another tasty infusion.
You like that?
I do.
Yeah, that's it's an unfiltered Nagori sake, but I kind of infused it with mango, a little apple, and there is a sour plum.
You know, you always amaze me. So thank
Nice
you
little-
for joining us on Sex Talk. This is our passion. Everybody should have conversations about sex and sexuality all the time. If you're
Exactly.
parents, you should be talking to your kids, not once at the kitchen table when they're 15, but throughout their lives with age and stage appropriate information so that they can grow up empowered and in
Exactly.
charge and in control and
Indeed.
sexually healthier.
Indeed, and we would like to empower you to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit the notify button, leave some comments.
Please.
Again, let's want you to be a part of how we've been growing. We are so appreciative and so grateful for those of you who have been following us and listening to us. We thank you. For those of you who are watching us for the first time, we welcome you and appreciate your being here. Another toast to you all. I'll go ahead and take a filler on that.
Please share. If you came to us through Facebook, please like and share and let your friends know.
Indeed. Cheers.
So,
Another week. And again, hopefully everybody survived the weather that we've been having, especially those of you in that storm corridor. I know it was really pretty bad. I think AOC has apologized at this point, so hopefully the wind turbines are freed up and unfrozen. Hopefully you got your electricity back. Right,
Yes.
exactly.
hopefully our folks in Texas got their power back on and are not receiving a $16,000 or $17,000 electric
Yeah, how
bill.
crazy is that? How crazy is
Leave
that?
it to Texas to have their own grid from the entire rest of the country. Right, the Lone Star State, they wanted to be independent forever.
That's right.
The
That's
country
right.
of Texas.
Right. So again, hope everybody's doing well. Again, up north as well, it got hit hard. So we just wish everybody's doing okay at this point. Right? And this is on top of COVID and all that other nonsense that people have had to deal with.
And
So-
to anyone within the sound of our broadcast, come on down to Florida. There's plenty of room.
That's right. And you can stay with Ricky. So another week gone by, or another week opening up, depending on your perspective. There's really never a shortage of things to talk about when it comes to sex and sexuality. And I don't want to waste any time for tonight. I really want to get into our guest tonight.
Yes, indeed.
And really looking forward to that. It's a good conversation. It's not always that we get a chance to talk to other educated. We talk to a lot of clinical people. We talk to a lot of medical people. But those of us that are in sex education, right, really have kind of a different take and a different job when it comes to sex and sexuality. You know, we are trying to educate. We're trying to inform. And as we often do talk about with people in the field, this is not an easy time or place to do this work. Not that I can think of any time that was easy or any place that is easy to do it in, but with so much emphasis put on porn in particular, with so much emphasis put on sort of individual identities and expressions, it seems like it's not so easy to have a healthy, supportive, nurturing relationship. Right?
Especially for young adults, for high school students and college students. There's still such ridiculous fear and resistance that if we talk to these people about sex, you mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, how crazy is it to think that we're going to put ideas in their head?
Right.
Right? I think puberty does that
pretty
well without any help from anybody else. Just the sheer denial, right? My precious angel baby's not having sex. Or I think our little prince knows what to do, right? And there's just still such a disconnect from generation to generation. Parents just, no matter how cool they were, right? Because remember we talked about this, even with
that's an
hippies
irony.
Kids.
Yeah.
Even when I started in the early 90s, just doing the math, the students in my classrooms were the offspring of hippies. And they weren't talking to their kids about sex.
Right. And in fact, really getting very conservative when it comes to issues related to sex and sexuality.
I've been guilty of this myself. I'm great with your kids, but when it comes to my kid, all of a sudden there's a little conservative that comes out in there. And
that's right.
I think I got a lot of sighs of relief having survived her adolescence
Absolutely.
knowing that she was raised right and made good decisions. And
she was
empowered.
Yeah.
Even though she'd probably be mortified. But remember there was a moment when she was like maybe 4, barely, all wrapped up in a big towel after a bath. And then out of the blue, I heard, "Daddy, what's this tickly thing right here?" Even, doing this for a living. My first reaction was panic. Oh my God, I should call Marilyn. What do I say?
Yeah. Again, just because, people do something for a job. Right? There's that old, that old cliche about the shoemaker's kids that are barefoot.
Oh God, yeah.
Right?
Got holes in their own his own shoes.
Exactly.
So we said we didn't want to waste time, and we're gabbing.
We're wasting time. But all of this is really, just want to say, to kind of set up this idea that, we're talking to somebody who is just sort of just one of the best sexuality educators out there, has been for a long time, has really contributed so much to this field. I think is a great person to talk to about how we navigate all this stuff, right? Sex education has to occur in context.
Right.
And no matter what that context is, and we spend plenty of time railing against the context that we are working in, but the reality is we have to work with it. And our guest tonight, I think, is a really good example of how we can continue to move forward working with a pretty unhealthy context in which to talk about sexual health.
Right. So really, it was an honor and a fun conversation with a dear old friend and colleague, Bill Taverner. Hello, welcome back. We are very excited to welcome a dear old friend from the sexology world, Bill Taverner. Welcome, Bill. Thanks so much for joining us.
Really great to see you.
Great to see you too. Hi, Ricky. Hi, Larry. Really good to see you. Nice to reconnect.
It's been
way too long.
But it's been a really great while that we're affiliated, and I'm really happy about that. Been a conference buddy. You've been around as far as I can remember being around. in our sexology circles at conferences and trainings. Just in the world of sexuality education in particular, your name is one that you really can't study sex ed too long before coming across it. Your contribution spans from curricula development to training and conferences. And of course, we can't let you go without talking about the sex ed series that you're currently running. My first one last night, and not only was the presentation wonderful, talking about ensuring access to sex ed the same way access to everything else for people with a variety of disabilities. And just, I love the format. I loved the spirit in the group. I loved seeing some old familiar faces or names. So in terms of your bio, it's lengthy and storied, but just to give folks a little taste, you are the editor-in-chief and founder, right, of the American Journal of Sexuality Education, a prolific writer and author, 75 publications, as I said, teaching manuals, articles, book chapters, lesson plans. Just like, I was thinking on the way over here tonight, when you think of sex therapy, there's certain names, Michael Perlman, Stan Altoff, that you can't study.
The Siegel brothers.
Go on. You are on that illustrious list when it comes to sex ed.
Absolutely.
Thank
right?
you. It's very kind of you. Thank you.
No, for sure. It's, I don't like thinking about how old we're getting, but yeah, it goes back to the early 90s we met. Right?
Was it as, see, I'm
No,
remembering.
probably 94, 95.
I can pinpoint it because I don't know about how much of an impression I left, but you left an impression on me, and it was 1998 or 1999, and I had flown to Palm Beach, and I was giving a presentation about a publication that my colleague Sue Montfort had just finished, Unequal Partners, and. Do you remember that? I can remember plain as day, where we were in the hotel. Like I can't name the hotel, but I remember having a conversation with you that was so in depth about, you were asking questions about the research methods, and you were talking about some of the things that you had found because the presentation was on relationships between teenagers and adults, and when adults seek out teens and vice versa. And you had gathered some data on motivations for older men who were interested in teen girls, and quotes that we actually wound up using in Unequal Partners later on.
Do you remember? Yes. Well,
it's a long time ago.
Yeah. And really what Larry and I have found, this show, by the way, really dropped in our laps. We never sought out to do such a thing, but we're thrilled that it has. And then, censorship and the FCC and being on the radio with some guy whose job it was to watch sports and eat fast food and keep his finger on the button to bleep us or sometimes dump us completely. If
that happened a couple of times,
So we figured we could do it ourselves better with my genius nephew producing, and just it's like a YouTube show. So it's been freeing, and we've had the opportunity to talk sex, right? Like everybody should be talking sex. But what has turned out to be the primary motivator, just like our 30 years plus in sex ed, is frustration and aggravation at what we're working against all the time, the politicization of what should be exclusively a health topic. And the thing that is most universal to every human being on the planet is probably the one thing that causes more discomfort and controversy. And what's, looking back, what's your take on why and will we ever be so hung up and puritanical with sex?
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball to figure the answer to that out, but it makes me think of a presentation I was giving yesterday, talking with college students, Sandy Karen's class at the University of Maine, and someone was asking about how do you broach the resistance to sex education that makes it exist in various community, well, throughout society, but but also in various community-based programs. And one of the things that I talked about was, this is something that's with us. The puritanical, anti-sex, erotophobic kind of orientation that our society has. I think sometimes we need to be able to recognize that and be able to, when we're going to a program director and proposing some classes for senior citizens or the juvenile justice program or the substance abuse treatment program, we need to not come in with, hey, let's teach about healthy sexuality and let's teach about sexual pleasure and masturbation. That shouldn't be our opening line. We need to recognize that a lot of folks are driven by fear and that they're afraid of the rise in STD rates. They're afraid of the non-consensual encounters. We need to acknowledge where people really are and speak to those needs and see where those opportunities bring us to at least open the door.
See, now that's, it's interesting, that point, because what I see in that too is it's another one of those sort of, why are we doing this? That people do seem to be more comfortable kind of framing and thinking about sex in terms of negative outcomes, negative experiences. And it's almost like sex positive is taboo.
Yeah.
And
that's,
just like, what you're just saying, that, the lead foot really in so many places can't be pleasure and healthy sexual relationships. For so many people, the only accepted context to talk about sex is in the context of problems and pain and trauma.
And that's not to say, of course, that we abandon the sex positive things that we have to say. It's just, like you said, the lead foot is what should be reconsidered. And then once we've built trust and rapport, and we have many more sessions at our opportunity, then we can expand what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So, and I think you're better at navigating that than I am. And I'm going to say it this way, and I hope you don't take any offense, but one thing that I've always sort of admired and respected in how you are able to do all that you're able to do is you can manage. You seem to be or have an easier time with the political correct part of it. I have a really hard time with that, and I find that there's a part of me that just naturally resists it. So, I find myself sometimes trying to beat down the door, and you seem to walk in a lot of those doors more easily.
I appreciate that. I try to see where are the opportunities and situations. And I remember when I proposed a teaching manual on teaching about abstinence, my predecessor, who I know we all loved and admired, Peggy Brick, was horrified that I would want to write a teaching manual about abstinence. And my thinking was, if this is the frame that the country is talking with right now, why don't we give our take on it? Why don't we talk about, if we're really going to teach about abstinence, let's talk about what does it mean? And, it's not a lifelong decision. So when, how and when do decisions change? What steps do you need to follow? What do you do or not do while you're abstaining? Those kinds of questions.
Nobody's even talking about abstaining from what?
And abstaining from what, right?
The
Yeah.
choice in most, and I think this still continues now. Most teens boil the message down to either you be celibate or chaste, or to hell with it. Just go. You're a lost cause. Go screw your brains out. Nobody's
Yeah.
talking about pleasurable sexual activity and perhaps abstaining from intercourse or abstaining from direct genital contact. But you know that
And what other things, are something that a person will engage
Right.
with.
Right. Another favorite made-up word, outer course.
Yeah.
Right? It's so much better than foreplay, which is just so loaded with sexist ideas and missing the point that it's not sex until this is happening in some
Right.
other.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and as we've talked about a number of times too, there is this genital obsession that drives a lot of this. So it seems really difficult to even broach the subject of sexual pleasure that does not involve intercourse in terms of penis in a vagina or an anus. It seems that's the way it's still being defined, and that's still the context for it, right?
There was a matrix, maybe you're familiar with it, that Gina Ogden and Beverly Whipple had created, called the extragenital matrix. This big grid. Have you ever seen it?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I have seen it.
It's a grid where I forget what's on the top and what's on the side, but there's a list of body parts and a list of possible things to do. So there's stroking and touching and kissing and caressing and all kinds of things. And with Beverly's and Gina's permission, I made an adaptation of that to make it into like a dice rolling game where I have students will, on one die will have a body part, and then on the other die will have one of the possible behaviors, roll it, and all of these are non-genital. And so that they can see, they can think about at least and evaluate, if you roll, kissing forehead, well, maybe that's not going to do it for everybody, but, or stroking, the inner arm, like that can feel sensuous. But we don't think about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And do you find that with, we're living in a time right now where, for especially young people, porn is the primary educator. In fact, there are a number of studies, or at least, two of them that I can think of, where, and as I'm sure you are very familiar with, where students, college students, high school students are even saying they get good sexual information from porn. So how do these kinds of approaches, how are they received in this sort of pornified world, especially among young people? You find that they're receptive to those kinds of exercises?
I think it's really challenging because I don't think any of us in public health or sexology ever wanted porn to be the educator, the de facto educator, right? And yet, I was reading a stat, and this may be outdated, maybe the numbers have shot up, but it was a few years ago, where it said that during the previous year, we had consumed like 90 billion hours of porn, and which sounds enormous by itself, but then if you factor in that these are not feature-length films that people are watching, so you're talking about a few minutes of viewing, per viewing, and so that's a lot of porn that we're watching. And of course, young people are watching porn.
Right. And let me also throw in, it's not 90 people watching 1 billion hours.
right.
So forearms.
Walking funny.
And then we have community educators and health educators and public health professionals who are carry the same baggage that all of us do regarding the taboos that date back to well, for centuries. And, I can blame it all on Graham and Kellogg, but we could probably go back a whole lot further than that.
Before then.
But so there's a resistance to, oh, this is going on, what do we do about it? And if we talk about porn, is it going to make people want to watch it? Which is the same faulty kind of premise as, if we teach about condoms, is it going to make people want to have sex, with condoms? Well, maybe that's not a bad thing, right?
Right, of course. But is watching a NASCAR event make someone go drive 200 miles an hour on the way home?
Yeah. So for a lot of folks, I think the result has been hands off. Let's just not talk about this. It's just too hot. And, getting back to meeting people where they are, if this is what they're doing with their cell phones and their tablets and their laptops, then we need to shift our education and stop doing the banana on a condom and think that, we've done our thing. Right. So we need to present opportunities for young people to think about, for example, their values. What do you think about? Let's do an opinion activity. Let's do, the ethics of porn. And that's not to say that there's a right answer, right? Values clarification is helping you form, what do you think about this, rather than having no context. It is what it is, and we're never going to talk about it, which is the modern day version of like Peyton Place. And like, there's this book, we're all going to read it, we're never going to talk about it. And throw in any, cultural reference in the decades in between. We need to be able to talk about this. We need to be able to have conversations about it. We need to, we need to have conversations about what's missing in porn that, that doesn't, that may be different in a real relationship. And that's not to castigate porn, because porn is never intended to be, a documentary.
Entertainment, right?
Yeah,
right. It's entertainment. I think Paul Joannides had a great line that he had said to us when we spoke to him as well, that the way porn is being used as an educational kind of thing, it's kind of like thinking you're going to learn how to drive by watching the Fast and Furious movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, don't say that.
Paul's great for those analogies.
Really separate kind of place, all into its own, and again, the context for it. I'm curious about what you think about this idea that I think the thing that porn really does give, especially young people, is something to say yes to. So much of sex ed and the way it's been put out there is this barrage of no, right? Yet when they turn on porn, it's all yes. And as educators, can we learn from that? What can we take from that into our work?
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. And it's making me think about what is the whole approach that we as adults are using with teenagers. Are we wagging our fingers at them and giving them no all the time? Do we have opportunity to say yes? Are we so afraid of something that we don't want? We want to pretend that it's not there and not talk about it. But yeah, it is something to say yes to. And I think our former Surgeon General Joycelyn Elders was onto something when she recognized that, this is something that we should teach about. Of course, she got fired for that.
Right. Ironically.
But that was what? That was 20, was it 20 years ago? 30 years?
Yeah, well.
Am I losing? 30 years ago. Almost 30 years ago.
Fired by Bill Clinton, so that was...
Instead of taking her advice, perhaps he wouldn't have... made sure that his presidency will always be remembered for the blowjob in the Oval Office. There is so much irony in this. And I remembered that we also shared in common from our earliest days, attempting to bring sexual health into addiction treatment.
Yeah. Yeah, that was I know that's your forte, and you've written curricula on that and done other writings on that, and of course that was some of my earlier work. I worked with Phoenix House for several years in New York and New Jersey, and developed some curricula for them. And really, I have to say that, you know, if you put my curriculum that I developed for them in like 1995, if you put it in front of me today, I'm sure I'd be embarrassed and say like, no, I wouldn't do it that way. So that part of my career, I think about as I learned so much from the residents, more than I think I ever gave to them.
Right.
I remember, you know, what I remember learning that was the most valuable was the raw authenticity that I would get. If I was teaching college students about sexual dysfunction, it was all theoretical. If I walked in front of a group of residents at Phoenix House and I started talking, you know, like a theoretical model, they would call bullshit on me, and they wanted to know how come I can't get it up, and you know, and why do I come too
Stone
early?
sex
And
is the reality.
Right.
yeah. So and the communication was like people were really hurting for information and having you know, distorted sexual maps and maps that had to be reconfigured because they experienced their sexual development while they were getting high, and so you know, they you know, that just messed with. I mean, just to think about that, to not be able to experience puberty and first sexual attractions with, you know, kind of like a fog lens, is something that folks were overcoming. So I learned so much more from them, I think, than they learned from me.
Yeah, and that was a big part of my formative experiences, because I was doing that in the 80s, in the late 80s. And that was, again, I mean, it really was so enlightening. And I think a lot of that, you know, especially I guess the reality aspect of, you know, sex in the context of the drug using behavior, I think it really did help inform a lot of my work as a sexuality educator, because I did see early on that there is this and there is the bullshit. You know, and then you look at the context of real life, and like you say, not just the theoretical, not just the academic. You know, that's nice if you're sitting there taking notes, but it's not nice if you're trying to figure out what the next step in your life is that you have to take. Right.
And also watching residents struggle with what they thought was a sexual addiction, possibly replacing their drug addiction.
Right.
And I know that, you know, Ricky, you've written about you know, the problems with. Have you written together on that?
Yeah, our chapters.
You know, and I'm remembering when I was editing Taking Sides that we had an essay that you wrote, and you know, the whole problematic framework of sexual addiction, but you know, lacking any other understanding, you know, and having people telling you that you got a sex addiction now, you know, is something that, you know, that folks would, you know, absorb.
Well, in some circles, it's a sought after diagnosis, particularly a lot of fundamentalists and evangelical Christian folks, because it's easier, there's less stigma to be told you have this sort of dreadful psychological illness, rather than admitting you don't have the perfect little Mormon marriage or the perfect little Christian, right? That's the ultimate. And of course, nobody's talking about masturbation, for which porn is just the perfect distraction, right?
Yeah.
Looking at porn is just about as ridiculous as sleeping together, right? Everybody remembers when they were a kid, the first time they heard that expression, sleeping together, Like, oh, slumber party, can I come? Beat
No,
it, kid.
I used to tell people, and if anybody ever asked, did you sleep together? I usually tell them to say, no, we didn't get any sleep at all. We were up all night fucking our brains out.
You know, there's a Billy Joel song. I wish I wish I could think of which one it is, but it's one, maybe it's Moving Out, where there's a line about sleeping together, you know, like spent the night or something like that. And as a kid, I was trying to figure out, like, I don't get what the big deal is here. Like, you know, what's the meaning here? But I was also the person who, you know, when you know, growing up as a kid in the 70s, listening to Push in the Bush, you know, I was thought, like, someone's mowing the lawn, like, what's going on here?
It's
how far
think
we
about how we learn, all of these places that we learn, and this is our sex education. We're talking about porn as a sex educator, but, you know, all of this information and the stuff that we're absorbing and just never having challenged, it just kind of seeps in. And so how many years did I live with push in the bush? You know, like that was in my brain. Never had anybody to talk about what is a bush, what is the pushing, what is, you know, and so the world around us is our sex educators, and the formal sexuality education that happens in the classroom is just a small part of what folks are receiving.
Yeah, I'm always it's always really powerful to see in SAR trainings, the sexual attitude reassessment trainings, that, you know, as intense as they can get, but people so often point out how the good old-fashioned basic kind of sex ed lesson, the memory lane activity, hits people so powerfully, because they have to think about, where did I first learn about menstruation, or wet dreams, or and you know, it's hard to even remember at what age and what was the source of that information. So you're right, siblings are sexuality educators, friends on the playground, TV, MTV, right? All it's just that constant bombardment of confusing and mixed messages.
Yeah. And I mean, and this both defines, I think, a lot of the work that we do, and presents some of the greatest resistance to the work we do. You know, we used to do a lot with, I'm sure you're familiar with Soot Jolly's documentary, Dream Worlds. It was originally done in the late 80s. Oh, if not, you definitely need to check it out. It's dated in terms of the music, but I mean, it's powerful. It's really, really powerful. He was commissioned by MTV to do this video. He was a sociologist, I think, at Yale. He did this documentary, and it was basically about sexuality in music videos.
When music videos were still kind of new.
Right. And as soon as the MTV brass saw it, they banned it for life.
Right.
And he does such a great job. He is pretty boring. He's not the most dynamic speaker. You know, got to kind of get past that, and even some of the fashion stuff. But it really shows how the way music videos are made are exactly the way porn is made. And even talks about the crossover. A lot of music video directors came out of the porn industry. And there's that pornographic gaze. And he really focused on the way, the messaging for and about women in music videos. That's the dream world. I mean, it's it really is incredibly powerful. You definitely need to check that out. And in the first version of that, it was right about that time. What was the movie? The Accused with Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
And he sort of at the end, to show how all these images really are, sort of mixed in commercials with the rape scene from that movie, The Accused. And the most disturbing part about that is it was really hard to tell where one began and the other one ended.
Well, and Bill, I know that's another work/hobby thing that you're into with music and videos and lyrics. I just lost the point I wanted to ask you
Related
about.
to sex and music.
Yeah, the messages that.
But do you want me to talk about the?
Oh, I remember. Yeah, it was. Don't ask me the song, but a video that Snoop Dogg did back in the '90s with Dr. Dre, and at one point, as he's following 8 or 9 women into a back bedroom in the hotel suite. And then as Snoop Dogg walks in, Dr. Dre is there, the wingman, and unfurls
That whole roll of
a roll of condoms. And I remember a kid in the class trying to argue that that was a safe sex message. And I said, dear boy, if that serves no other purpose than to guarantee, in case anyone wasn't clear, that Snoop was about to have sex with all 8 of those women. Just reinforcing that. I'm sure they weren't thinking about AIDS prevention.
No, right. And it was a tip drill that part of that, one of the scene, we're running a credit card down, through the butt cheeks of a woman. And that's really what that documentary, it really shows that the way women are portrayed. And
adolescent male
as much
fantasies.
as we try, and I've never been surprised to hear things like 80% of adolescent males feel that if they could get away with raping a woman, they would. Nice to know the only thing that's stopping them is that they would get in trouble. It never surprise me that 85% of adolescent males thereabouts believe that if they spend a lot of money, parentheses, $20 on a woman on a date, she's obligated to have sex. But I've always been really bothered by the increasing number of adolescent girls who are agreeing with those statements, who are buying into those messages.
Yeah. We have to be mindful about what music messages, what the lyrics are telling us, and what gets under our skin that we're not even aware of. In the Sex Ed lecture series, we've had 2 programs so far that talk about hip hop education. Using hip hop as a sex ed tool, and one presentation by Alicia Andrews and Lolita Smith Moore, and another by Kelvin Walston, gave a great deal of insight into how music, again, meeting young people where they are and being able to think about the lyrics and understand the cultural meaning, as well as what they're actually saying, and opening up opportunities for people young people to think about what they're listening to. And this is it's a passion of mine, because some years ago I had written a lesson plan called Behind the Music, borrowing from VH1, where the activity is literally having students think about selecting different songs and then breaking them up and determining what are the messages about relationships or sex and relationships that they're hearing in these songs, and then rewriting lyrics. So then I'll give a model like Ira Reese's honesty, equality, and responsibility, and Sue Montfort and Peggy Brick added respect to that model. So I'll take that 4-prong model and say, here's how we define each of these. Now what I want you to do is I want you to insert a new stanza into your favorite song. And what I've had to learn to do over the years is to try not to be judgmental about the music, because you don't want to destroy something that a person loves, but you want them to think about it. Absolutely. You want to be aware of what's making an impression on you, but you also want to respect it. So.
Right. And, I don't think we've ever talked about this, but I used to do the same thing when I was running the Adolescent Sexuality Training Center with Michael Carrera. That was something that I would do in a lot of those programs. I would have them put their favorite rap or hip hop lyric songs, and we go through it and we see what it is about. And we're talking about women and all of that. And then I'd say, okay, now what is this saying? We talk about the messaging. What is this saying about women? Now, is that your grandmother? Is that your mom? Is that your sister? Is that your auntie? And have them really process it there. And then we would, have them rewrite the lyrics to better sort of express the way they feel about women. That's such a powerful tool. It really is.
And you can still enjoy the original lyrics, but the whole point is to get people thinking. And that I think is a part of sexuality education that gets lost in understanding what are we really trying to do with sex ed. And the political battles seem to be, or have been for decades, focused on, are we only going to teach about abstinence? Are we only going to teach, do we insist that we include contraceptive and condom information? And that's where the battle lines have been drawn. But I think what's missing is what Debbie Rothman, Debbie's the author of Talk to Me First, what she writes as the purpose of sex education is to teach young people how to think. The same way we teach any other subject.
What to think, right? Exactly. How to
think critically, to think in terms of being able to make decisions. We don't teach, trigonometry because it's going to be useful this weekend. It's because it makes our brain work in different ways that we might not normally make it work, or chemistry, or all of these subjects. We don't memorize the periodic table or understand the, I don't know enough about chemistry to speak with analogies, but we don't do it because there's inherent merit in understanding these difficult subjects. We do it because it helps us to think, and we need to treat sex ed in the same way, that we're developing lifelong critical decision-making skills that are going to help people identify what makes a healthy relationship. How do I feel about my body? How do I treat another person? How do I respond when somebody's bullying someone? All of these things are not as simple as, did you wear a condom? Which is unfortunately what we've boiled down what sex ed is all about in terms of research.
Right. And I think that kind of goes back to this idea that we are so focused on the negative, because even a lot of that processing, and even a lot of very well-meaning and very good sexuality educators, it's still that no message. It's still, all right, let's talk about these things because we don't want these things to happen. And the framing is still so much what we don't want to happen. And I find, in years both as when I was doing therapy and as an educator, I find the most difficult question for people to answer is, what do I want? Right? And so I think that framing is so important, because what do you, not just how do you feel, but what do you want? What do you want to see? How do you want this to be? And I think even, sometimes we're not even aware of it because it's almost just so baked into the fabric of what we do that there tends to be that negative perspective that's hard to break out of.
I liked your point also when we were talking to Paul, that most people start off with what they don't like.
Right.
But it's real hard to find what they
do.
Exactly.
You ask people, what do you like? Well, I don't like this and I don't like this.
Yeah. And to throw in the money aspect to it, it's also a question of what is our government willing to fund? What are our foundations willing to fund? And what they're looking at is, we see a problem, fix that problem. And the problems that they're identifying are not necessarily the things that I would not that, of course it's important to address teen pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. All that's very important, but it's one narrow part of sexuality education. And if we could fund what you're saying, what do you want in a relationship? What do you want in a sexual encounter? What makes you feel good as a sexual person? That's the kind of research I'll be interested in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And and again, when I don't know that I have ever heard anybody in sex ed, as they're doing sex ed, ask people what makes you feel good.
Were you at, I think it was maybe the second Deeper Well conference in Olympia in like 96? No.
I was, and you know why I know that, Ricky?
Yeah.
Because you gave me your Spotify list of the Rolling Stones that I was just looking at today.
Oh, how funny is that? But I love when that shit happens. But I was remembering Dan Savage was the plenary, the keynote speaker. And it's in the quote is in the same PowerPoint as Robbie's hysterical cartoon from when he was a kid. But his very first words, if you remember, were, and I quote, "You people need to quit your fucking jobs." And
Yeah,
the room
yeah.
full of sexuality educators just went like,
What?
what? And he was making that point that the kind of fear, the tiptoeing around, oh, I'm so grateful to get the gig and I don't want to say the wrong thing and lose it. And I have to talk about STDs and pregnancy and this fear of talking about pleasure and empowerment and this game of pretend. It's just like when you got that call from Catholic Charities to Covenant House.
Covenant House.
To go and talk to a group of girls that were pregnant or parenting or had been pregnant and not
and boys, and all of them had just had a sexually transmitted infection. They were all on the street.
Yeah.
Right.
And they told them, you can't bring condoms. You can't talk about anything but abstinence.
I can't talk about birth control. I was not allowed to say penis or vagina. Right. And what it ended up,
did you work in a vulva then?
Yeah, not even. I couldn't even address the genitals. That was actually the first time I used that phrase about the plumber, and you're like asking me to come in and clog up the pipes instead of cleaning them out. I told him I would be happy to give you whatever information will help you do that, and I can support you in doing that, but I'm really not going to come in and do that. Unless, and I kind of found that back door to go in, right? Because they then came back and said, okay, well, you can talk about that stuff, but you can't talk about birth control, right? And you really can't talk about any of that stuff. I said, okay, but talking about sexually transmitted infections, I do need to talk about how these things to protect those will not work as birth control, and, kind of found that sort of end around. And I'll tell you, the people that literally came running up to me after I did that program to thank me were the nuns.
Oh,
really?
That were instructed.
Nuns are great. I love nuns.
To keep an eye on me and not let me go where I'm not supposed to go. But they were the ones that seemed to appreciate it.
The 12-year-old that lives in here was jumping on the table and screaming, giggling because you said back door and end around, which unfortunately kids left on their own without any good proper sexuality education will find out that that's birth control.
Right.
My very first time delivering a positive HIV test result, and you remember it was days of the confidential testing, so all we had was a barcode. I had no idea who was coming in. Turned out to be a 17-year-old girl. And, like talking about the ego, I was the one freaking out. How am I going to deliver this news? I'm not, right? She was on the receiving end.
Yeah.
But I planned for every possible response except hers, which was like, nuh-uh, must be some mistake. I'm a virgin. And for a minute, I bought it and went, well, oh my God, did you have a transfusion? Were you ever in the hospital? Did IV drug use? And then got the better of myself and came back around and asked more thorough questions and found out that she'd been having unprotected oral and anal sex since she was 12. But had every intention of saving her virginity, her vagina, for marriage.
Those behaviors don't count. And that gets back to what we were saying earlier about if you're going to teach about abstinence without being explicit about what we're actually talking about, what are you doing? Because like any subject, we need clarity. We need to be able to meet young people where they are, and we need to be absolutely clear about what we're talking about. We can't be vague about it.
Right.
Have you seen the video? I mean, it was on YouTube forever, but then it was featured on John Oliver's show with the sex educator from Mississippi who teaches how to use a condom by putting on a sock. Have you seen that?
No.
It's watch the sex education episode of last week tonight, and I'm sorry for the gentleman because I can't remember his name right now, but he's an educator, I believe, from Mississippi who was forbidden from teaching about condoms So he walked his students, he created a video walking his students. Here's how you put on a condom, talking about leaving a tip at the end, making sure it's rolled on all the way, all of the things that are in the jargon of what we would say in a condom talk. He worked in, so sex educators can be clever and
Yeah,
genius.
we're nothing if not adaptable. And
We have to be. Yeah, we have to be.
oh, I'm afraid we have to wind up. I could sit and talk with you all night, and
Oh yeah, likewise.
I've got some catching up to do. I really can't wait until we can travel again and start having conferences and getting the old family reunions going again.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, for sure.
real happy to spend this time with you. Let's not make it the last
very.
time, huh?
Okay. All right. It was
Yeah,
great seeing you guys.
Definitely.
Good.
Hope,
Yeah,
same
Bill,
here. Thank you so
much.
much. And again, thank you so much, Bill.
Indeed.
It's a really good conversation that definitely deserves a toast.
Bill is just so on point and prolific, and like you said, does a far better job than we do with. I wouldn't even call it political correctness. Just middle of the road, universal messages that are really hard to argue with.
Well,
right?
yeah.
Conservative people have sex too.
Absolutely.
Right?
And what
They
I
might vote against.
and what I would also
policy.
characterize it, and again, where I think Bill, you always did a better job than we did on that. Sort of that difference between a sort of judo and karate type of approach. We're more karate. If we see an obstacle, we wanna fight it. We want to attack it. We want to get it out of the way. Yet he's so good at, and as he was saying, working with people where they are, and kind of making it kind of a dance, sort of working with them, guiding them to where they need to be, but never trying to force them. Right? So it's it is, and it's a cliche word, and it's so overused, but there really is inspiration in hearing such effective ways of doing that.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, I'm sure he knows the number, and I forgot to ask him, but just trying to imagine the hundreds of sexuality educators that he has trained or who have worked with him, for him. Again, here's to you, Bill. Thanks for joining us.
Indeed.
We'll have you back again soon, I hope.
And I think that's going to do it for tonight.
Yep.
Right, another issue of Sex Talk. We'll put that one in the books. We thank you all again from the bottom of our hearts for joining us and making this happen. Again, without you, we would just be two old guys sitting here ranting. Right? So we appreciate, and again, thank you again. Please hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification on Facebook, hit the likes and the share.
Comments.
And yes, absolutely. We would definitely love to hear from you. If anything you want to add, any question that you have.
Any topic you'd like us to cover here on Sex Talk.
Indeed. So, thank you, my brother.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you all. We appreciate it. Have a great night. Stay safe and be well.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.